Israel is really fighting a war on two fronts. The first is a military campaign being waged in the occupied territories against the Palestinian people. And the second is a PR campaign being waged here in the US through the American media to ensure continued support for Israel's occupation.
Given the central role played by the United States in the Middle East conflict, and thus the vital role played by American voters, influencing U.S. media coverage of the conflict is crucial.
A typical TV news report, for example, on ABC News, will show dramatic pictures of these confrontations where Palestinians are confronting Israeli troops and the Israeli troops are responding. For most Americans who don't understand the history of the conflict, this is an example of riots that are going on where the authorities are taking measures to crack down. What's not mentioned is the fact that these confrontations are taking place on occupied territory.
We don't see the suffering that the Palestinians are undergoing through occupation. We don't really understand how bad the occupation is for them. No empathy, no sympathy, no sight of women unable to reach a hospital to give birth and children and their babies dying at the checkpoint because they can't get through. If you don't see that, your heart doesn't skip a beat and say something's wrong with the occupation.
CNN sent out a memorandum to its staff in the Middle East. In future, Gilo is to be called a neighborhood.
The Jewish neighborhood of Gilo on the outskirts of Jerusalem.
The Israeli neighborhood, Gilo. Gilo, a Jewish neighborhood in East Jerusalem.
Now, there's a great deal of difference between a colony, which is what the settlement is, colon as the French say, and a neighborhood. A settlement, an Israeli settlement, is built for Jews and Jews only on Arab land, and it's illegal, against international law. A neighborhood is just a nice, friendly place.
This is southern Jerusalem, a quiet neighborhood. And while the only thing beating down on me right now is the rain, bullets frequently rain in this area, which is the reason those Israeli tanks are right back there.
The Israelis are now stationed in force all over the West Bank, their iron grip designed to prevent suicide bombers getting through.
In American media, there's a reversal of cause and effect in that the occupation is framed as a response to suicide bombings.
Palestinian attacks and Israeli retaliation.
Israel resumed its retaliation. Violence could escalate over the coming days as Israel retaliates.
Israeli soldiers say their actions are justified. They use suicide bombers, he said. We use tanks.
Israeli Prime Minister Sharon said his nation has taken many steps to cooperate in the search for peace, but the only thing it's had in return is terrorism, terrorism, and more terrorism.
You can't defend yourselves when you're militarily occupying somebody else's land. That's not defense. Call it what you like, it's not defense.
In addition to the military occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, Israel is also involved in an attempt to ideologically occupy the American media.
Lack of context is so dramatic that only 4% of the network news reports on the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip mention that the West Bank and Gaza Strip are occupied.
If people know what's going on in the occupied territories, I don't want to support it. I mean, any more than they support other atrocities that we're responsible for. So you keep it quiet. Describe it as a defense against terrorism, not as brutal military occupation, which is evoking resistance. If U.S. policy shifts, coverage will shift.
A Palestinian man emerged from a taxi on a busy shopping street in downtown Jerusalem with a machine gun in his hands and hate in his eyes.
Another young zealot willing to die so he could kill Jews on Passover.